Every single day you're following rules, thousands of them, traffic laws, social norms, the list goes on. But what if the most powerful rules, the ones that are really steering your life, your career, your whole society, are the ones you can't even see? Well, today we're diving into the work of Esfict Imhotep to pull back the curtain on the 7 invisible laws that are secretly running the whole show.
Just think about it for a second. Who decided that a piece of paper from one university is worth more than another? Or that your signature on a document can legally bind you for years? What about the unwritten rules of power that guide how entire countries behave? These aren't just little suggestions. They're the operating system we're all running on.
So here's the big idea. Most of the rules that control our lives aren't actually written down in some official law book. Nope, they're woven into our culture, our companies, and even into our own minds. And just understanding them, just seeing them, is the first real step to getting better at navigating the world. So let's start at the beginning. How do these rules get their power in the first place?
All right, first up, the laws of authority. This is all about the bedrock of power. See, it's not enough to just make up a rule. People have to actually believe in it. These first 2 laws are going to show us how rules are made to feel totally legit, unshakable, almost holy. The first one is the law of sacred authority. The most powerful move in history to make a rule stick. Claim it comes from somewhere you can't argue with. The gods, Mother Nature, immutable laws of history, you name it. This move takes a simple command and turns it into what feels like a profound moral truth. And this is not just some ancient history thing. It has absolutely evolved. Back then, you had a priest king saying, "The gods told me so." Today, it's a lot more subtle. It's the soft power of a famous university or the authority of the science. When these institutions make a declaration, it feels so objective, so sacred, that it becomes really, really hard to question. Okay, so here's how you can actually use this. Ask yourself, in my life, in my job, what's the sacred authority that no one questions? Is it the market? Is it company tradition? Is it some political idea? Just identifying that source is a huge step toward thinking for yourself. Now, if sacred authority is the idea, the next law, the law of ritual, is the performance. It's the physical act that makes the idea feel real. A rule is kind of just floating out there in the ether until you do something that locks it into reality. I mean, a king isn't really a king until he's had a coronation, right? An oath you say out loud just feels way more binding than one you just think. And in our world today, the ultimate ritual is signing a contract. That physical movement of your hand with a pen, that's what turns ink on a page into a binding legal force. The ritual gives it weight. And you can totally use this on yourself. Don't just decide you're going to start a new habit. Create a little ritual. Write down your goal like it's a formal pledge. Sign it. Put a date on it. Tell someone you did it. It sounds simple, but that little ceremony hacks your brain, making your own personal rule feel much more real and way harder to break. Okay, on to our next section, the laws of the books. So once a rule has authority, it needs a system to work in the real world. And that's where writing things down comes in. We're going to cover 4 laws here, and they're all connected, all about how written rules get made, bent, and used to keep things running the way they are. The law of codification is, it's fundamental. An unwritten rule is basically a suggestion. A written one, that's a command. The second you write a law down, you change the game. It becomes permanent, you can show it to anyone, and most important of all, you can formally enforce it. If it's in the code, it's real. But, and this is a huge but, here comes the law of interpretation. Just because something is written down doesn't mean everyone agrees on what it means. Words can be tricky. So the real power isn't who writes the law, it's who gets to decide what the law means. That's the power of judges, lawyers, and priests. They're the gatekeepers of meaning. So you see, it's this 1-2 punch. First, you write the rule down. That's codification. It now exists. But then, somebody has to decide what it means in the real world. That's interpretation. And that gap between the two, that's where all the power is. So what can you do? Become the interpreter of your own life. Just pick one area. Your job contract, your lease, a key tax rule that affects you. Actually read it. Understand just one important part that applies to you. And please, keep the documents. That signed contract isn't just paper. It's codified proof. It's your power. All right, this next one can be a little tough to swallow. It's the law of privilege. The idea is that really complex legal systems, especially things like tax codes and corporate law, they aren't complicated by accident. They are often designed, whether on purpose or not, to protect the interests of the people who are powerful enough to write them in the first place. Now, the action here is not to go get a law degree. It's just to shift your mindset. Stop assuming the rules are straightforward or the same for everybody. Just know that these complex parts of the system exist for a reason. Simply being aware of concepts like tax shelters reminds you that knowing the hidden rules is your best protection. And the last law in this group is the law of adaptation. No system of rules just sits there. When new challenges pop up, protests, new technologies, people finding loopholes, a strong system doesn't break. It bends. It evolves. It creates a new rule or a new interpretation to absorb the challenge and stay in control. So what's the move? You do the same thing. You become an adapter. In whatever system you're in, your job, your finances, look for the ethical, legal workarounds. Maybe it's a little-known tax credit or a productivity trick that uses company policy to your benefit. You're still playing by the rules, but you're playing smarter. Okay, we've talked about authority, we've talked about the power of writing things down, but our last law gets to the gooey, emotional center of it all. It's the law of the mind. What makes us actually want to follow the rules? It all comes down to one thing. And that thing is the law of narrative. A law is just a boring instruction on a piece of paper until you wrap it in a story. It's the story of freedom or fairness or progress or tradition that gives a rule its soul. The story is what makes us feel that a rule isn't just a rule, it's the right thing to do. This has been true forever. I mean, think about the founding myths of ancient civilizations that explained why their king had the divine right to rule. Think about wartime propaganda that framed a conflict as this epic battle between good and evil. And today, just listen to how any new policy is sold to the public. It's always wrapped in a story about who it helps and why it's the moral choice. So here's your last, and honestly, probably your most important action item. The next time you hear about a new law or a new policy, train yourself to separate the rule from the story they're telling you about it. Ask yourself, who benefits from telling this story? What feelings is it trying to make me feel? And could I tell a totally different story using the exact same facts? That, right there, is the heart of critical thinking. So there you have it, the 7 laws, from sacred authority all the way to narrative. Let's try and bring this all together now. How does knowing about these invisible rules actually change anything? You know, it's really tempting to look at a law like privilege and just say, that's evil, or look at ritual and say, that's good. But that's kind of missing the point. These laws aren't good or evil. They're not moral forces. They're just tools. They're like the physics of how human groups organize themselves. And Imhotep really nails it with this quote. These invisible rules didn't just appear out of thin air. They're systems that we humans built originally to help us cooperate and survive. But over time, those simple tools grew into these massive, complex systems that now shape our lives in ways we don't even notice. So, the most important thing to take away from all this is simple. Real freedom isn't about having no rules. That's chaos. Real freedom is understanding how the game is played. Because once you can see the invisible architecture all around you, you're not just a piece on the board anymore. You're starting to see the world like a rule maker, and that changes everything.